wing time. Hi everybody, and welcome back to Plastic Models by a Regular Dude and part number 3 of the Monogram 1/48 scale B-25J. Alright, let's recap real quick. So in the last video, I basically got the fuselage interior done and put together. So that included steps 1 through 7. I'm sorry, 1 through 8. And yeah, the only real difference was I glued the bomb bay doors and the cockpit entry door. I glued those in when I put the fuselage together. Reason being is I was having the bomb bay doors closed, so I didn't want to do that later. It was better to do it while the fuselage halves were apart. So with all of that, everything went together pretty well. I still have to sand these, but I'm letting them cure really well before I start sanding the seams. It actually fit together pretty nicely. No real surprises. One thing to note, this circular opening here for the upper turret, despite some flash right here that needs to be removed, that I'll do when I do the rest of this, it really looks good. It's a very nice round circle. It's not going to look really weird once I put the turret in there, so that's a good thing. So I don't really foresee too many problems cleaning this up. I think, I haven't decided yet, but I think some of the detail that I'm going to lose while sanding, I'm going to try and keep some of it from being destroyed. But like this right here, I'm not even sure what this is and why it's a panel like that, but I'm going to assume that it's, you know, I'll have to look at some photos. Point being, I'm probably going to rescribe some of the surface detail. Now, like the panel lines themselves, I'm not worried about those. Those will actually look fine raised. I'm not concerned about it. But like this right here, if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong, but I think this is like a life raft storage area, but it's some kind of removable panel. So I'm probably gonna, because I'm going to lose some of that detail right there. So I think what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and describe it, just to keep it really sharp, and I'll probably scribe this here. Okay, I'll look at the bottom, see if there's anything I need to do there. Some of it, like if I lose this right here, I'm not really going to be that concerned because it's going to be displayed sitting like this and nobody's going to see underneath it. And some may say, oh, that's a cop-out. Well, maybe, but you know, you got to pick your battles. So anyway, that's the plan of the fuselage, but that's not what I'm working on right now. Right now I'm going to work on step 9, which is the upper and lower wing halves for the starboard side or right side and the engine nacelles. So I'm going to start cleaning these up, getting them ready, and we'll take a look at them. All right, so I'm test fitting the wing here, and I've got it all taped up and fitting it to the fuselage. It actually fits really well. However, there's a gap on the bottom if it's left unmodified. So what I did is I cut off a piece of, whoops, that's not the one, piece of styrene here, and it is the right thickness to spread that out a little bit, so I'll be able to glue that in there, and that way it'll fit nice and snug with no gap around the edge. And I'm hoping that the other side will be the same. So I'm going to go ahead and get this all glued together, and then I will start working on the engine nacelle, however you say it. All right, so I have the wings glued together and all of the seams sanded, smooth, as much as I can tell without having some paint on it. So those are done. So now I'm ready to do some more work on the nacelles. So I've got the two halves glued together. They've dried really well. It's going to take a little bit of cleanup, but first I want to do some test fitting on the actual wing itself. So it goes together like this here and that there. Okay, so as you can see here, there are some pretty sizable gaps. So what I've done, I've worked a little bit on it already, and I trimmed a little bit of this off so it sits a little further down, but still there's these big gaps. Now I thought about spreading the nacelles a little bit with a spacer. In this case, I just cut a toothpick or cocktail stick, or whatever you want to call it. I cut that to put in there to see how it's going to affect the fit. So it closes the gaps up a little bit, but not really enough that it's going to make a big difference. I may do it anyway, but we still have a gap back here, but that's okay because this is the flap here, so there would be a gap, but there's still a gap there. So I think the best course of action is going to be to get it as tight as possible on this side here, and then this side here, since there's not as much detail to wreck other than this little access panel, I'm going to fill all this in. Now if I do it correctly, I may not damage that. And what my plan is these edges right here sit a little higher than the actual wing surface. Okay, so even if I filled it, there'd be a weird hump right there. So what I'm going to do first is I am going to use, if I can get a grip on it, I'm going to use the scalpel here, and I'm going to carefully scrape it off. Whoa. Well, not scrape it off so much as scrape it down. Careful not to dig into the other surface. Okay, so I'm going to be doing this. So I'm going to get it shaved down to where at least it's a more gradual fillet. And then I'm going to use some filler and fill that in. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to use some sprue first, some styrene strip to fill that gap in really well to where the actual filler itself, which kind I'm going to use, I haven't decided yet, I can fill that in and have a nice fillet going from this to the wing, which is the way the real aircraft is. So it's going to take a little bit of work, but it should be okay. This part here, this is pretty, the surface from here to here flows pretty well, so it'll do the same here. I'll just fill that in and sand it smooth. Here it will just be a matter of gluing and filling. I may even be able to glue it and not really have to fill much if I glue it properly, because these two parts here do fit pretty well. But there's a lot of detail around here I want to try and avoid messing up, so we'll see how that works out. And then once I do that, then I can put this part on here, and there's going to be more filling there, which I'll probably do with some styrene sheet, cut it in there, and then just shave it down and sand it smooth. So it's going to be some work, but it shouldn't be too bad. All right, so I did as much as I could. I've got the nacelles glued on. So while those are drying, I am going to start working on this. Wait, I already glued this. Wait, no. So I need to clean this up. And then I'm going to test fit these, but I'm not actually going to install them yet. So I'll probably put the tail piece on first, and then I'll do these. But I want to make sure they fit really well first. And real quick, what I like to do for stuff like this is scrape it totally flat using either a knife or a scraper. And that will ensure that this gets the maximum amount of contact, plastic to plastic, so it fits really flush like that. So yeah, so I'm going to continue on with that. I also got to clean up the edges of these. Okay, so these parts are all cleaned up. The vertical stabilizer / rudders, the horizontal stabilizers. The nacelles have been glued on, and I've used some Vallejo plastic putty, 100% acrylic resin. I put that here and here and was able to wipe it smooth with a combination of Q-tips, makeup applicators, and a wet finger to get a pretty decent joint there. It actually looks pretty good. Now once I get paint on it, it may not look quite as awesome, but I think it will serve, because I didn't really, first, it's not going to matter that much because it's going to be sitting on a shelf, so you're not going to see underneath it. And to date, I haven't had anybody pick up any of my models and look around at them, so, you know, cop out, whatever. But it does look pretty good, and I was able to maintain the rivet detail there, which I wanted to save. So everything's all smoothed out there, so I'm going to let those cure really well before I try and glue them onto the aircraft, because I also want to I got a little bit more sanding here and here to do, but after I get that done, I've already started test fitting this, and it fits pretty well actually. Now there is a bit of a gap there, but there is, just in looking at photos, if I'm not misreading, there is natural panel lines there. So I should be okay. And what I'm going to do in order to fill this huge gap, I'm going to use some really thin styrene, and I'm just going to insert it like that, glue it in really good, trim that off and sand it. And then I'll have to rescribe the line a little bit, but that'll give me a nice tight fit right there without having to try and bridge that with filler of some kind. So that'll work out really well. And then these, I've already done the cleanup. I think I talked about it a little bit earlier. Flatten these out really well. So these fit nicely. They fit really good. So I've got that to do. I also need to, I should have put this in the same time I did this one, but I didn't. So I'm going to have to get clever and figure out a way to glue this in without dropping it inside the fuselage. Shouldn't be too hard, but you know. And one thing to note, this seam right here, it is totally smooth, but I've noticed that where the edges of the plastic, it seems to be a little bit darker. So I don't know if it's like the metal particulate that's must be put in, or to give it this color, this kind of a dull metallic color. I don't know if it collects along the edges, but it gives it this color. So it looks good, and it's really super smooth. At least, you know, it feels like it so far, but I won't know for sure until I just thought of something. I need to scribe this right here, because that is part of the door. So for that, I'll be using a straight edge and my scriber. I'll talk about that later, but for now, I need to get this door in, and I need to finish sanding this stuff here. This is already done. Need to sand that a little bit more, sand that, and sand that. But other than that, everything's going pretty good. These parts actually fit together better than I thought they would. And they actually fit to the wing better than I thought they would. For such an old kit, the fit is actually, I mean, the gaps were pretty good size, but it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. And it looks like they, these seams here and here follow natural, like, edges of the fillet that would be between the nacelle and the wing. So, you know, it's old technology, but it's not bad. I will have to sand this stuff here and here, get that looking a little bit better. Right here, there's a natural panel line there and there. So I just need to kind of fill it in and get it smoothed out as good as I can, and should be okay. So far, so good. All right, I have successfully glued the door in place, and as you can use, I had some assistance from Tamiya tape. So basically what I did, I don't know if you remember what it looked like from the previous illustration or previous segment, but let me see if I can find it on the instructions here. It looks similar to this, but it had two little ears here that are supposed to be like, I guess, a hinge or something for this step to hang down. So what I did is I cut those off, and I cut the little ladder part off. And then I carefully, it was a little bit largish, which was good for this opening. So what I did is I sanded it just enough to where it was a snug fit. I just test fit it from the side. And then once I got it to where, this is the little ladder part that's cut off, to where it was somewhat snug, I just got the tape, put it on the part, bridged it across as you saw at the beginning of this little segment here, and then just put a little bit of glue on either end. Didn't do it on the side where the glue was because I didn't want it to seep through. And voila, there we go. So I'll probably have to score that a little bit, especially like right there with my, excuse me, with my, well, let's see if I can do it with this, because it kind of bridged the gap there, and I don't want that. There we go. That should be good. All right, so that's that. So next, I'm gonna glue this tail part. Sorry about the throat here, folks. I've actually had people scold me in my comments. It's like, clear your throat, dude. It's like, well, I'm trying. So I have this little thin piece of styrene here, and this is gonna fit right there like that, and then drop into place like that. So I'll make sure everything's lined up. Glue along both sides of this, glue along all the outside edges, let it dry really good, and then I'll just trim this off and carefully sand it down, and that should fill that gap. Now there's supposed to be a seam line there, so I'm not going to be too worried about making sure this is like totally smooth and blended in, because there is supposed to be a seam line there, but I do want it to be really tight, so that's why I opted to use a little bit of plastic. So I'll get that glued into place, and then we can move on from there. All right, so this is smoothed out pretty well. I'll have to check it again once I get to the paint and see if I got it smooth enough, but got that done. So this is all glued in place nicely, and I went ahead and glued on the front canopy cockpit glass, and have to say that it fit really well. Now I have a bit of a gap right here, but I'll be able to fill that in with the Vallejo putty. But other than that, it fits, I mean, it fits really good. I mean, I'll be able to tell better once I get once I get paint on it, but it looks really good. So, and fortunately, I remembered, I almost forgot, I painted this part in here black on the inside, but got that. So this door here is done. And let's see what else we got. Oh, and I glued this bit of plexiglass, or what they call that stuff, well, whatever it is, glued that into place. That fit really good as well. And again, I'll have to see once I paint it, or get some primer on it at least, how good it looks. But I did the same thing I did here with a shim of plastic. I did the same thing here, because this side here was a little bit lower than this side. So I just shimmed it up, filled that in, and then once I get some primer or surfacer or something on it, I'll be able to tell if I need to sand it some more. And then that should be ready. So that's all looking pretty good. So got that done. I also cut these off and test fit them, and they fit pretty well. This part here, there's a pretty good gap, but again, I'll just use some styrene, sheet styrene, and make myself a shim so I can get that all nice and smoothed in really well. Now, one thing I did have to do is on one of these, I don't remember which side it was, but one side, these ejector pin marks stood proud of this surface here. So this wouldn't really, this wouldn't really sit real flush and solid. It kind of rocked back and forth. And then I also had to make sure this was sanded down here. But once I did all that, it's all nice and really really stable. So once I get that shim in there, it'll be really nice. So the only other kind of part that might be tricky, and I say tricky, and that just means I need to do some test fitting, and then some maybe shimming or whatever, is this nose part here where the guns come through. As you can see, there's a bit of a gap there, but it's already less than it was. I've worked on it and got it, got it shaped a little bit better than it was. So it shouldn't be that big a deal to get this to fit good. You know, this side is pretty close, but still it needs a little bit of work. I was going to put a shim in here, but I don't know if I can with, I don't think it would really work. Well, it might. I may put a shim in there. I don't know. But it's going to depend on how the guns are mounted inside of there. I may not be able to put like a solid shim across. I may have to shim it around. But we'll see. It's not anything that can't be overcome. The main part is this top part fits pretty well, so it should be okay. With a little bit of light sanding here and there, I should get it to fit pretty snug. Okay, so there's that. But other than that, it's just going to be a matter of fitting engines, propellers, cowlings, all that kind of stuff that won't take a lot of, you know, fiddliness. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop this video right here and end part number 3 of the Monogram 1/48 scale B-25J Mitchell. So if you've stuck through this whole thing, I appreciate you watching it. Stay tuned for more. Come back next time and start fitting some of these other parts. I'm working on this nose, as I mentioned earlier. And we can start getting things a little bit closer to primer and paint. So, as always, if you have any questions, comments, hints, tips, concerns, all that kind of stuff, just put them in the comment section down below, and I will get back to you as quick as I can. So until next time, thanks for watching Plastic Models by a Regular Dude, and I will see you all later.